We know that the album Think of the Lie came out in 2021, but when, how, and why did Homefront originally get together?
Well, with the thing of the lie, that was kind of like during that time. That was obviously we kind of formed together during the pandemic, and was going on, and my hardcore band, No Problem, we had pretty much like we had a member who lived in Calgary, like in a different city, and our one of the founders of the band, he just had a baby with his partner, so it was just like that band was totally on hold. It was on pause. So I was just kind of like doing, making demos and doing stuff in the rehearsal space when a good pal of mine, Clint Fraser, who's the other member of Homefront, he contacted me saying, because he was also out of a band at the time, and was just like, hey, would you want to work on a kind of a synth-based project that he was kind of starting? And I said, I do, but I don't really know anything about how to do that. Like, I don't have the technical skill, but he had just finished, like, I knew how to do record, like I could record and stuff, but not, I didn't know about playing stuff to a grid or, the odds and ends of synths and stuff. So he was just like, yeah, no, don't worry about that. And he sent me, so I was like, okay, well, I have an idea for a song that I've been working on. I wasn't sure where it was going to go. So I was like, can you send me like some drum machine stuff, and then I'll see if I can put music to it. So he did, and so crudely, like I didn't know how to put stuff to a grid, so I just like cut and paste these 4 bars that he'd sent me, and I actually did them as 3.5 bars because I couldn't get the start part. Anyway, it was crude, but it ended up being like the demo to the song that we had on Think of the Live, Flaw the Design. And so I wrote that tune as is with this like really rough drum part. And he was just like, and I did vocals. I did it as a full demo, and I sent it back to him, and he was like, wow, this is really great. I have other ideas. He had other ideas, so he sent me some other stuff, and we turned some of those into songs. I think once we had like maybe 2 songs. So the first 2 that we wrote on that was Think of the Lie and Focus. Like the original version of Focus is really funny to me now. He wrote it. It was like a 6-minute song. There were so many parts in there. I was like, what the fuck is this? And but he had the really great synth hook that was like in the chorus. So I was like, hey, well, like let's keep that. And then we kind of wrote the song around that. And then we made it into a shorter tune and kind of sorted it out. But when it was all finished, like those 2 songs were finished, I sent it to Jonah Falco, he was in career suicide and fucked up, and he had been working. He did the first No Problem record as well, so he's an old friend of mine. And during the pandemic, we were always texting each other back and forth, like just sending each other music and jokes and stuff like that. And he heard these, and I was like, I sent him those 2 songs, and I was like, are these anything? And he was like, yeah, you gotta flesh this out. Like, this is a cool idea. Just keep going. So he really encouraged us to keep this going. And then we ended up writing about 10 songs, and they did and it ended up, we pared them down to the 6 best ones, and that's kind of how it all came about. And then we were like, hey man, would you be interested in producing this? Because they were still a little bit like, I think in my mind I knew that for them to be something special, there needed to be someone else's input to kind of like flesh it out. Because if it was just me and Clint, like he was definitely pushing more synth pop stuff. I was definitely coming at it from like way more of a punk mentality. So it kind of worked that the two of us got together, but we also needed someone else to kind of come in and rein in the ideas. I'll give you an example. So we did this one song. I don't even remember what it was called, but it was one tune. But I was really into Run DMC at the time. I still am, but I was like, man, it would be so sweet to have a song that was like the Run DMC song, "Hard Times." So we were kind of like, okay, well, let's get this really hard drum beat and like we'll put this thing together. And then I was like, okay, and so the vocals, I just kind of wrote something really quickly down, and I kind of was like shouting it a little bit, you know. So I sent it to Jonah, and he was like, he heard all the songs, and his notes for that one was like, what the hell is this? He's like, you sound like a coked out gym teacher like giving a team a pep talk at halftime. And I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe the song's not working, you know. But after that, I realized that he definitely had like our best interests at heart, and he, you know, his track record speaks for itself, like all the stuff he's produced and worked on and stuff like that. So he definitely helped us flesh out the ideas, and you know, and like and Clint just had really great drum, because he's a drummer and played in punk bands and stuff like that too, like from way back in the day. But he also played in like kind of like an electro band that had like a live element to it. So even though there's lots of synths and drum machines, they had like two drummers that would play live. It was totally prog kind of electro dance kind of music, and it was cool. Like I would go see them when they would play because they were a sight to behold. But so he was already in that world, so kind of grabbing the old dog that's from just like kind of like more DIY punk kind of stuff was kind of like a good, I think in his mind it was a good fit, and I think he was on something. So that's really how Homefront came together, was us like writing demos in our shitty jam space in the winter.
What kind of experience was it to start a new project in the pandemic time? I know in here there was a lot of duos, you know, popping up because you could only see one person.
That's pretty much the same thing. I think the fact that it had to be stripped down, having just one other person, like Clint was living out in like his parents live in like a rural small town that's just east of Edmonton, northeast, and it's called Bonnecourt. It's like some small little kind of, you know, quote unquote shit town. And he was out there and I was in Edmonton. So then when he would come to town, we would just go to the rehearsal space, and we would just like work on stuff in there. So we had moved all our recording equipment into there, and I mean, it was a great way to spend the pandemic, to be honest. Like he and I got together, we'd have like laughs and just like working on stuff. And I think once we started writing a few songs that were really interesting, you know, you start pulling out different stuff from your record collection. You start listening to it a little differently, and like early Ministry, like I was always such a big Killing Joke fan. So like those kind of bands kind of were in my mind, but started listening to a lot more like I think like punk from like 79 to early 1980 kind of stuff that was like really strange. Like Wire was a band that I listened to. Like, I mean, I've always been a huge Wire fan, but I think I definitely I think with this project, I've had my mind wrapped around the fact that they were so fearless when it came to like whatever they wanted to do at any given time was what you as the listener were exposed to. And I kind of appreciated that as like a fan of that band, was just like, you never know what you're going to get. It's not always good, but they're definitely like, don't give a shit. So I think that's kind of a cool vibe to have as well. I think for us though, it's just kind of like, well, let's just open it. Like it's just like kind of opening up our minds to different different stuff. Like obviously, like Clint and I were huge Devo fans, and going into the project, and like even like bands like the Cars, we would listen to and just be like, well, like it's not so far from what like Blitz was doing on Second Empire Justice. Like they pretty much were like they were a punk band that had like really like they're very influenced by Ramones and like a lot of like English street rock, and then the next year they're clearly influenced by all the stuff that was going on in northern England at the time. And UK new wave is such an interesting vibe of music that there's a lot of good songs that came out of that time and from really interesting things like Flock of Seagulls. Like really, they have a really punk ethos when it came to like some of the early songs, and like same with like OMD. And I also really I really got into the fact that a lot of these songs, not just New Order and Joy Division, who are obviously huge influences on us, same with The Cure, but it was like some of that stuff like Flock of Seagulls, OMD, you listen to that and it's like they still have kind of punk lyrics that kind of like, stuff about like nuclear war and, like being alone and isolation. And I guess we kind of really bonded with the fact that it's like we're from Northern Canada. Like we're from a city that not a lot of people care about. Even though there's some like really cool punk bands that have come out of here, like SNFU and, stuff like that. But it's definitely kind of like a city that we just kind of have to dig our own well to get something going. So I think we just really identified with like a lot of Northern English, like kind of synth stuff from like the 80s and post-punk stuff that was like, I guess I really don't like the term post-punk, but it's just like, I mean, I get why people put that label on us, but it's just, to me, it's just like, we still want to be a punk band, but it's just like with a lot of feel from like, like Generation X or, like Killing Joke, like that. They're just like a big part of what we are, as well as Joy Division and New Order and stuff like that. So I don't know. That's kind of like the long story short. It's just that the pandemic really kind of forced us to just kind of explore different things because we had nothing but time.
Did something change for the new album, Games of Power, and how would you describe the music on Games of Power?
So when we did Games of Power, we actually did that. I think the first song we worked on was the song Faded State. And we did that in January of 2022, I think. So we'd like Think of the Lie was still being mastered, and we had already just started work on demoing like new songs. So what eventually happened was we just kind of rolled right into it. And I think for us, the stuff that changed was we were still like exploring a lot, like what we wanted to do. And Jonah really helped us again. He stayed on board. So we like worked on production with us, and a lot of the pre-production, like songs we would write, we'd send it to him. And this was also the same thing that we did with Think of the Lie, was that you would like write a song to as much as completed as you thought it was, email it to him, and then he'd send you back suggestions, and then you would try certain things and to try to like kind of, I don't know, just kind of like get things going or what have you. Try different things or whatever. So with Games of Power, we did that pretty much for like a full, I would say probably like 6 months till we had like a good handful of songs. And then we, there's a guy who played in this band called Shout Out, 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 Out. He also played in a bunch of Edmonton punk bands as well, like a band called The Cleats that were kind of more like Stiff Little Fingers, stuff like that. And his name was Nick Kozub, and he was our engineer that we used for Games of Power. and he had a lot of production tips, and he helped produce the thing with Jonah. But the reason we also went with him, aside from the fact that he's an old pal and, you know, does a lot of cool music, he has the gear. So he had like real synths that we could use. So before we were using all like kind of stuff that was on like, you know, like samples of kind of digital, kind of like synthesized versions. But like when we got together with him, he had the real like analog synths and the real drum machines, like a real 808 and a real 909. And so we were just using those for the drum machines and stuff like that. And I think that really kind of opened up the sounds for us. And it definitely opened up our imaginations to be like, okay, well, let's just try whatever the fuck we want. Because no one is expecting anything from us. So, you know, so I guess that's kind of my beef with, I guess, some of the post-punk stuff is like, it, you know, even though there'll be like guys who used to play in punk bands or hardcore bands or something like that, it's like they'll have the sound and then it's the same thing over and over. I think for us, we definitely were like, okay, well, I like lots of different types of music. So I love Misfits, so why don't we try a song that sounds like early days of Misfits? Oh, and let's, you know, mix it with Radio Birdman because I love that band too. And let's try a song that sounds like Suicide, or let's try a song that sounds like a weird era of New Order, or let's try, you know, it was always this experimentation. And I think that's what kind of, I think so when people listen to the record, I feel like they'll hear lots of different things in each song. And I think that was intentional for sure. So I think it's like, you know, like, yeah, sure. There would be times where we'll lean on like, you know, some goth records but then there's also times we listen to like Blitz and listen to the weird era of like oi music that kind of had synthesizers, like the Coxbar song, Out on an Island, like, or Angelic Upstarts. There's a record called Reasons Why. You listen to that, and there's like songs like Woman in Disguise and like a song called like Waiting and Hating. And it sounds like there's like synths and stuff like that. And to me, it's just, you can tell that the bands are still the same. They still like have that like punk feel. It's just, they're now getting to their like fourth or fifth record, so they're trying different stuff. Well, I think for us, we were just kind of like, well, let's just do that let's just keep doing that. And I think that's an important part of our band. It's just like trying to be creative and constantly hitting our record collections and constantly hitting different types of music, like from, you know, really dumb caveman oi and punk and hardcore, and then also really sophisticated and brilliant, you know, synth or prog music, or, you know, disco or whatever. It's just like trying to like, I guess, like there's a song we just worked on, and I think the idea was like there was a Small Faces song that I love, and I was like, well, that'd be cool if we did like Small Faces song. But then I thought about it, I'm like, but it'd be cool if we did a Small Faces song if like Echo and the Bunnymen was doing Small Faces. So it's like, so let's do like from now, but it's like going through the 80s doing a version of a song from the 60s. And I think that's kind of how we approach songwriting anyway. So we could take like something very simple, but then just run it through like 50 filters of like, you know, because we'd be like, well, you know, like Echo and the Bunnymen did a whole bunch of, you think of how many 60 songs were covered by, you know, like Soft Cell, or, you know, like all these old Motown songs that were covered by, you know, covered by 80s groups. And they're always really interesting, you know, not all of them, but some of them. So I guess that's kind of with Games of Power, was just like working with Nick and working with Jonah, and obviously having Paco from La Vida fully backing whatever our decisions were, just because he was at that point when we started demoing Games of Power, he was just a fan of what we were doing. So he just wanted to see what we were coming up with, and we didn't show him until we had very strong skeletons of songs, kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of how that stuff progressed into Games of Power.
You are actually coming here to the old continent in October, November in UK and Europe tour, and actually here in Berlin too in November. So what are your thoughts on the tour?
Well, I'm excited. I can't wait. So with Homefront, one of the things was we went backwards from a lot of bands. So we wrote music, recorded music, did all the records before we even knew how we were going to perform live. But now, so now we have like a band with us. So it's Clint and I. Clint's still doing all the synths and drum machines live, and I'm just singing. And then we have Warren, who is the drummer from No Problem. He's the drummer. So we have like live drums. And then we have Brandy and Ian playing bass and guitar. And they're in a post-punk band called Rhythm of Cruelty. And so they kind of are formed with us. And we've just been kind of working on the live sound. And I really think we're getting somewhere where I think it's like it'll be pretty powerful for some people, because we still want it to have that attack of like seeing a punk band, even though there'll be like some more kind of crooner songs or whatever, but it's just like we still want that to hit like it's like you're seeing a punk group. So yeah, I think we just finished a tour with Poison Ruin in the States, and it went really well. So up next is actually we go back to the States, but after that it's going to be UK, and then we're going to come down and visit all you guys in Europe. And yeah, I'm excited. So I think the show, I feel people will get something out of it.